Hey, what is up guys, Maz and Tech here, and today we're going to be doing a still worth it review for the iPhone 7. So including today, this phone will be 10 years old. So as you know, if you were subscribed to the channel for many years now, you would know every year I would do an iPhone 7 still worth it review. So every year, these phones, they bog down the performance, they make it unusable. And since we're already talking about performance here, let's talk about the performance specs. So we get the A10 Fusion chip, Apple's first quad-core processor, paired with 2 gigs of RAM. And since it's only 2 gigs of RAM, but the thing is, with iPhone, what they do is, since it's 2 gigs of RAM, they basically optimize it to be 4 gigs of RAM. So basically, on an Android phone, the 2 gigs of RAM they have will feel more like a 4 gigs of RAM. So it's just very nice that the iPhone can optimize that, but they don't really optimize the actual GPU to make it more usable, which is not a good thing here. But they only optimize the RAM, which is very weird, but it's alright. This phone's 10 years old, yeah? I mean, they have to do it because they want to make more people buy newer phones, but it's okay. So let's talk about the storage too. So options with the storage: 32 gigs of storage, 128 gigs of storage, and 256 gigs of storage. So all of these are the highest you can get is 256, right? The highest you can get is 256. So with that being the highest, I would basically pick the 128 gigs of storage, and the 128 gigs of storage is the most popular one. Like if you went on eBay, Kijiji, Facebook Marketplace, you would find the 128 gigs of storage model if you were to buy this phone. And this phone is very cheap. You can get this phone anywhere from 60 bucks to 100 bucks. And this one is going to be very nostalgic, right? So I would really like, if someone were to buy this thing, I would pick the 128 gigs of storage version, because with the 32 gigabytes of storage version, it's not a very good version like to get it. The 32 gigabytes of storage is like, if you were to download an app, it would take more storage over time, yes? And with this being 32 gigs of storage, that 32 gigs of storage is just gonna go like that. It's just gonna go away very fast. So I'd pick the 120 gigs of storage version, or maybe even the 256 gigs of storage version. But who's buying this phone in 2026, right? So that's okay here. So the performance specs is basically a 5 out of 10. Let's get on to the display specs here. So we get a 4.7-inch Retina HD display with 720p resolution and a 60Hz touch response rate. So on paper, the 60Hz touch response rate and the 720p resolution is not very good. But since the thing is very small, you're not going to see pixels everywhere on the screen. Like you would if you looked very closely, you can see pixels, but if you're just looking at it normally, you will not see pixels. So if this was actually a 1080p display on a 6.1-inch display, maybe even 6.5-inch, it would look like a 720p display. But this screen actually looks like a 1080p display, maybe even a 1440p panel, because the thing is so small. It's not going to be like, you won't see pixels on it. That's just very good here for display. But since the thing is only 60Hz touch response rate, which is very bad, but since it's only 60Hz, it's okay. Because this phone is 10 years old, and since it's 10 years old, back then, phones were really capped at 60Hz, maybe even 50Hz. So it's okay. That's just the display. At this being 10 years old, I will give it a 7 out of 10. Because for this being 10 years old, the screen looks like a 1080p panel, and the screen just looks good for this being 10 years old. So let's get on to the battery specs here. We get a Leon 1900 mAh battery, non-removable, only 15 watts charging. So I'm not even gonna call that fast, because it takes about 1 hour 30 minutes to 2 hours 30 minutes for it to charge. So really now, not gonna call that fast charging, but for the battery and this thing being 10 years old, I'm not gonna give it a very bad rating. But here's something you need to know. When I went to the settings, went onto battery, checked battery health out, this thing was at 68% battery health. So what that basically means is, when you charge the phone up to 100%, it will say it's at 100%, but really it's at 68% because the battery is just taking on a big chunk because this thing's being used so much. But necessarily, it doesn't mean that we can't optimize it to make the battery last longer. So how I'd optimize it, we would basically turn on low power mode and not have a lot of background apps open in the background, and just like be careful with your usage. Don't use it so much, because like if you want to have this thing for a full day, it's going to be very impossible. Like me, I would have to charge this thing maybe 3 times, 4 times a day for it to basically use just minimalistic use. Like just playing a bit of games, watching a bit of YouTube, scrolling on social media would be a very big thing for this phone to do. Like you would just watch a video for 5 minutes, right? Battery would go down by 10%, which is very, very bad, right? But it's alright. Necessarily, this phone is only 10 years old, so it's okay. We can't really complain here. So let's get on to the we get a 12 megapixel rear camera. So that's gonna be basically the main camera, right? And we get up to 4K at 30 FPS and 1080p at 60 FPS. So it's so weird that people say the more megapixel count, the more 4K recording you get, the more better recording you get, right? But if we go into the Samsung Galaxy A17, the A16, they have 50 megapixel cameras and they only go up to 1080p resolution. And since at 1080p, it has 50 megapixel camera. This iPhone 7 has a 12 megapixel main camera, right? And you can get 4K recording at 30 FPS, which is very, very odd. It just, how can something 50 megapixels to 12 megapixels just be that much of a jump, which is very weird here now. But the thing is, because since things, if they optimize it more, they can actually make it look better, which the iPhone 7, they optimized it really nice to make it look very nice, right? And make it look more of an overall better usable experience for the camera. So let's talk about the rear camera here. So we get a 7 megapixel rear camera. You can only get up to 1080p video recording for the rear camera, and since it's only like 1080p, it's not going to be like the same as the back, but you can get 60 FPS on the rear camera, so that's going to be good too. So what this tells us is the camera is worth much more than the phone itself, because we have 4K video recording at 30 FPS and we have optical image stabilization. So this is just, the camera is worth more than the phone, which is very weird here, but that's very good. It's especially just saying that Apple really optimized the camera really well for it to be more pleasant. So I forgot to add that this only has a digital zoom up to 5x. So you're not gonna get 100x digital zoom. You're only gonna get 5x digital zoom. So yeah, that's gonna be quite sad here, because this is just very low. Like, you're only able to zoom up to 5x. So that's not gonna be that good. So here's another thing that I want to talk about. I have rated the battery specs, the camera specs, the performance specs, and the display specs. And if I average out all those numbers that I rated them, it gives me about a 6 out of 10. Or maybe even a 5.5 out of 10. So what this tells me that the phone is not very bad, or it's not very good. It's just in the middle. But why this phone is in the middle is because this phone is 10 years old, and if they optimize this phone much more, it could conceivably be maybe even a 7 out of 10 or a 6 out of 10, maybe something like that, right? But it's not optimized. It's just here as is, just refreshed, everything refurbished, everything refreshed, everything just here, right? So this phone is a 5.5 out of 10, and for this thing being 10 years old, which is very good, because if this was an Android phone, it'd be very unusable. You can't do anything with those 10-year-old phones. But I had a phone called the ZTE Axon Air, and that ZTE Axon Air could play games up until now. Now it doesn't handle anything, but 2 years ago it could handle games, watch YouTube, watch TikTok. Just very laggy and very slow. But if you guys enjoyed this video, make sure you guys like, subscribe, and comment. Tell me what you guys think about the iPhone 7, and see you guys in the next one. Bye.